Hello, I'm Pastor Paul. Welcome to the Lord of Life Lutheran Church Sermon Podcast. We're glad you're here. We know that you can't always be in worship with us, so we're glad to provide the sermons from our weekly services. We hope that you will find hope and inspiration as we have in Jesus Christ. And now, here's this week's message. The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Now, as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. You may be seated. This week, Larissa and I hosted a large group of friends at our house for a cookout. We like to do that. It's fun. There were seminary classmates in town for the 10th anniversary of our graduation, and we decided it was time to reconnect in person, so here they came. The preparation for the cookout and all of the other activities that we did over a few days took a lot of planning and a fair amount of cleaning, and a lot of logistics and food and music and seating and figuring out when to start the grill and when to start cooking and all the stuff that you do to get ready for a house full of people to come. Have you ever had a house full of people at your place? It's a little bit of preparation, right? We started planning this gathering months ago, literally months ago. By the time everyone arrived, we had a solid plan in place and we were ready. We had plenty of food and even more laughter, and late in the evening we sat around the campfire together and we shared stories about ministry and we listened deeply to each other and we laughed and we laughed and we laughed, and I took a moment underneath the starry sky around the campfire to thank God for the amazing blessing that it is to have friends such as these in my life. Why do I tell you that story? Well, there's a party going on, and it's at Mary and Martha's house. Did you catch that? I wonder how much time Martha and Mary had to get ready for the party. How much advanced warning did they have? Was there a Facebook group that was tracking Jesus' movements throughout the Middle East to figure out when he was going to make it to their place? Nope. There might have been some advanced people who went out. We do hear that Jesus sent some folks out ahead of time to make way, but even then I'm guessing that's probably just a couple or a few days at most, right? So one minute you're at home for the weekend, relaxing, kicking your feet up, and maybe you're having a beverage of some kind or another, and you're ready to binge watch Stranger Things on Netflix. Nobody? Nobody watch Stranger Things? Oh, you should totally watch it. It's funny. Well, the next minute, your friend sends you the text message that says, "Surprise, we're in town, and we've got the whole family with us, and we're going to stop by to see you." Panic? Yeah, now you have to do everything that you would have been planning for in a very short amount of time. You've got to get the house picked up, and you have to figure things out. Maybe run to the grocery store to pick up some whatever. So all the planning that took us months to prepare for comes down to a couple of hours and a last-minute grocery store run for you if you're Mary or Martha. And by the way, they didn't really have grocery stores. This reading appears in the Gospel according to Luke just after last week's reading. Do you remember what the theme was last week, the story that we shared? Bonus points if you do. Good. Yes, I knew you had it. Good Samaritan, right? Last week was the Good Samaritan. And the story about a young lawyer asking Jesus some questions and trying to understand what it means to be a good neighbor, right? Who is my neighbor? And this is another story on the road. We get on the road stories in Luke's Gospel. Jesus and his band of friends are on their way to Jerusalem. It's a travel story. And just after this reading starts chapter 11, and Jesus, we are told, goes off to pray by himself and then comes back, and the disciples say, "Teach us to pray." and then we hear the Lord's Prayer. And tonight, you get a bonus for the Lord's Prayer with a trumpet interpretation of the Lord's Prayer, which I'm really looking forward to, Mark. And thanks for the prelude music. That's fun. We, by the way, need to get you involved with our Fat Tuesday service, which will be coming up, right before Lent. Okay, so now back to today's reading. Many times when people read this story of Jesus' interaction with Mary and Martha, they get hung up with wanting to make judgments about these two women. Right? We want to make value judgments. Who's right, who's wrong? That's just kind of who we are. But what if we suspend that? Mary must be the hero, though, because she stopped everything to sit with Jesus, so that makes her better. But Martha's doing the right thing, too, and, you got to have hospitality, otherwise people are sitting around and they're hungry and they're thirsty, and it's hard. It's hard not to judge, isn't it? Martha's doing the right thing. I'd be pretty angry if I was hosting a surprise party at my house, the surprise being on me as the host, and the other people in the house weren't helping. Right? Don't we get a little bit, teeny bit angry? We feel ignored. The reality about making judgments about people, though, is that when we place our expectations on others, almost every single time we're disappointed. Right? Still, there's something to be learned in this story, absent of the judgment of these two faithful women. There's a question that lingers here for me. What is the better part that Jesus talks about? I don't hear Jesus telling Martha to stop being hospitable or to give up what she's doing, but I do hear that there is a belief that she needs to pause and pay attention, that she needs to take note, because something is going on here. Something's happening here, to quote an old song, right? What is it that distracts you? What is it that draws your attention away from your relationship with God? Is it possible to engage the better part that Jesus describes and still have a normal life? Or do you have to give everything up and run off and be a missionary somewhere? For most of us, God isn't saying drop everything and become a monk or a missionary or anything else, though God does make that call for some people. Right, Pastor Henry? Yeah. Pastor David Lose said it well. What matters is not so much what you are doing, but the attentiveness to God's presence and purpose in, with, under all our varied activities and responsibilities. What matters is not so much what we are doing, but the attentiveness to God's presence and purpose in, with, under all our varied activities and responsibilities. Earlier this afternoon, as I said, I had the privilege of being a part of Bree and Alan's wedding. When I'm at a wedding and I'm presiding at a wedding, I always make a point to pause with the couple and say, take a breath, look around, look who's here, see what's going on, soak it in. Understand there's something bigger than yourself going on here. I want them to be intentional about participating in their own wedding, because far too often a couple gets married and they've been so busy with getting prepared with all the details for the wedding, and then they have the service, and the service is fast. I mean, it's a half an hour, and they're married and they're gone, and the next day they're like, holy cow, we're married. Right? They forget to notice that they're getting married. It's a lot to do, and the planning can be overwhelming, not to mention it's the biggest party that most couples will throw in their lifetime. It's easy to get so wound up in our daily lives that we fail to notice Christ is with us. Sometimes we can get busy doing what has to be done, that we forget to pause and drink in the blessings of God in our life. Even when we are doing the right things, good things, things that are a blessing to others, we can still get a little out of whack. Even your pastor, from time to time, gets so caught up, so preoccupied with details and planning and looking ahead and studying and doing all the things I have to do that I fail to observe God at work around me. The better part. Was Martha so focused on what she was doing that she failed to be attentive to God's presence and purpose? Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly what's at the heart of this reading. Do we get focused on what we're doing so much that we forget to pay attention to God's presence and purpose in our lives? Sure. But by practicing our awareness of God's presence and purpose in simple ways, we will get better. God desires our attention, not to the exclusion of the rest of our lives, but to the inclusion of the rest of our lives. God sent Jesus to us because our relationship had become sick. The sin and exclusion of God in the world exposed the darkness of sin, an unhealthy path of humanity. God sent Jesus to heal that relationship, to remind humanity, to remind us that God is present with us, that God's purpose is for us to express God's love to everyone, to include everyone. The better part that Martha was missing and that we too often overlook is that God's presence and purpose makes our lives better. It makes our lives better. It fulfills us, and it serves the good of all the world. The better part is that God loves you enough to quite literally die for you, so that you may be freed from your fear of sin and death, so that you can live a life full in the presence and purpose of God. May it be so. Amen. Thanks for listening to the Lord of Life Lutheran Church Sermon Podcast. If you're ever in the Dubuque-land area, please join us for worship. Visit our website at www.lordoflife.online to learn more about service times and about our vision for serving God and our community. God bless you.